Theodore Roosevelt quote from a speech that he gave in the early 1900s at the Sorbonne, and a lot of people call it the Man in the Arena speech, and this is the passage that changes my life. It's not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done it better. The credit belongs to the person who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred with blood and sweat and dust, who, at the best, in the end, knows the triumph of high achievement, and who, at worst, if he fails daring greatly. So the moment that I read that, I closed my laptop, and this is what shifted in me. 3 huge things. First, I spent the last 12 years studying vulnerability, and that quote was everything I know about vulnerability. It is not about winning, it's not about losing, it's about showing up and being seen. The second thing, this is who I want to be. I want to create. I want to make things that didn't exist before I touched them. I want to show up and be seen in my work and in my life. And if you're going to show up and be seen, there is only one guarantee, and that is you will get your ass kicked. That is the guarantee. That's the only certainty you have. If you're going to go in the arena and spend any time in there whatsoever, especially if you've committed to creating in your life, you will get your ass kicked. So you have to decide at that moment, I think for all of us, if courage is a value that we hold, this is a consequence. You can't avoid it. It's kind of a new philosophy about criticism, which is this. If you're not in the arena also getting your ass kicked, I'm not interested in your feedback. If you have constructive information, feedback to give me, I want it. And I'm an academic, I'm hardwired for wrestling around with stuff like that. If you say, hey, you forgot all this literature, or hey, you should have done this, or terrible sentence construction over here, like let's do it. I love that. But if you're in the cheap seats, not putting yourself on the line, and just talking about how I could do it better, I'm in no way interested in your feedback. Vulnerability is not weakness. I define vulnerability as emotional risk, exposure, uncertainty. It fuels our daily lives. And I've come to the belief, this is my 12th year doing this research, that vulnerability is our most accurate measurement of courage. To be vulnerable, to let ourselves be seen, to be honest. So let me go on the record and say, vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. To create is to make something that has never existed before. There's nothing more vulnerable than that. Adaptability to change is all about vulnerability. And we were taught to outrun vulnerability. We were taught to suck it up, soldier on, get her done. Yeah. And so, however hard that was for me growing up, imagine what it was like for my parents in the 50s. You know, my dad, who was the youngest of 6, his dad died when he was 16. You know, he just did the next thing you do. Played football, played college ball. Yeah. My mom, who's my grandmother, who I named my daughter after, was an alcoholic. And she was drunk every other day of my mom's life. Wow. But she was the most amazing person in the world. But everyone knew she was an alcoholic, so my mom wasn't allowed to have friends at her house growing up because it was the 50s and she was divorced. You know, and so my mom became the head of the drill team and the valedictorian. And so however hard it was for me growing up, having to try to outrun vulnerability, it was a million times harder on my parents. And they did what they knew how to do. And they loved us as much as they could love us with the tools they had. And so I think the hard part comes from people that I've interviewed my whole life where the parents don't grow and change. And they see anything a child trying to do differently as criticism of what they did, as opposed to my parents who lean in and say, tell me more about that. Imagine if you went to the doctor because you were in pain and you had this terrible shooting thing in your shoulder, and when you were getting ready to tell her about it, where it hurt and how it hurt, your mouth was duct taped shut. You know, and you just were like, One of two things would happen. As someone who studied human behavior for 2 decades, I would say one of two things would happen in that examining room. One, you'd just start flailing around, knocking stuff off shelves out of just, just rage and confusion and desperation. Or two, you would just slide down on the floor in a heap out of despair. Like, I'm in pain and I can't communicate that to you.
Yeah.
And so we need the language, because here's the bottom line. We are neurobiologically hardwired for connection with each other. In the absence of connection, there is always suffering. There is just deep suffering, and we're seeing it right now in the world. And so we need language to forge connection.